Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 4th of November of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And before we start discussing the situation on the ground, I would like to discuss with you the political situation in Kyiv, with the situation with Zelensky and the situation with the military authorities. You know that there are two powers in Ukraine. The first one is Zelensky and his office, and the second, a very big powerful power, is military forces. And when talking about military forces, there are two figures, two people. Syrsky, the head of infantry army, and the second one, of course, Zaluzhny, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine. And currently there is a media campaign in Kyiv from Zelensky, that's right, from Zelensky, to make process to reduce the level of influence of these two persons, of Zaluzhny and of General Syrsky. And when talking about General Syrsky, the president office and the Ukrainian, let's say, sources try to blame this person in the failure in Avdiivka, in the failure in Kupiansk, in failure in Artyomovsk and Bakhmut, by saying that while the Ukrainians needed the forces in Robotyne, Syrsky sent up to 10 brigades in Klishchiivka to capture those two villages, and currently we see that there are no progress. But we need to understand that this is not the main purpose, like to say that this general is very bad. The main purpose is to remove either Syrsky and Zaluzhny. But you might ask, what is the purpose to remove these two persons, like Syrsky and Zaluzhny? Why Zelensky are planning to do this? Some sources are saying that the Ukrainians are planning to start elections, president elections next year, and that either Zaluzhny and Syrsky can be the candidates for the president elections, and Zaluzhny has a lot of chances to become a next president. And but this is not the main reason why Zelensky wants to remove them from their positions. The first thing that Zelensky tried to avoid and to prevent the military coup, because either Zaluzhny, either Syrsky has the power, they have forces, and either Zaluzhny and either Syrsky can tell, I need 10,000 people. Let's say Syrsky called to someone in Kupiansk's direction and told his people that he needs 10,000 soldiers, and believe me, there are going to be 10,000 soldiers who will start their movement in direction of Kyiv for the purpose to take the power and to arrest Zelensky. He understands this. And he understands that the Western countries are no longer want to support Zelensky for many reasons. The thing is that Zelensky made one important thing. From one side, this is very smart from his side, but from perspective of Western countries, this is very tricky. First of all, we need to understand that currently this is not the war between Ukraine and Russia. This is the war between Western countries, NATO countries, and Russia. And Zelensky made the entire situation as if he selling the rent of Ukraine for NATO countries, and he's trying to get money for this, some rent payment. So if you want Ukraine to fight with Russia, you need to pay rent for this. We are not fighting with the Russians. We don't want to fight with the Russians. You want us to fight with the Russians, so that's why you need to pay us rent. Not maybe Ukraine, but me personally and the people who surrounds me, the closest people. If you pay us rent for Ukraine, then you can use Ukraine in your purposes. If you don't pay us the rent, so that's why you will not get this asset for your military purposes with the war with Russia. And the Western countries understand that they need not just support entire Ukraine. The Western countries and the United States of America thought that Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom. So that's why they thought that the entire model is going to be to support and help Ukrainian people in their fight with Russia, to support their willing to join European Union and the NATO. And that was what the Western countries thought about. But Zelensky understand and to try to sell this product of Ukraine for money if you want to use this asset in fight with Russia. So that's why the Western countries want to replace Zelensky, and that's why they stop giving investments and finance Zelensky regime. And this is not because the Western countries doesn't have money. Believe me, they have enough of money to support dozens of Ukrainians, but they don't want to pay him personally. And Zelensky wants to make this structure when there is no, if there is no Zelensky, there is no Ukraine. If there is no Ukraine, there is no Zelensky. And that's why he tried to remove the military, like political forces like Zaluzhny and Syrsky, not because they're like the first guys who can replace them as the president, because these guys work directly with NATO officers and they can start military coup any second. And he wants to replace them because they have too much power. There is only, according to Zelensky configuration, there might be just one person who can have this endless power, and this is Zelensky. If there is no Zelensky, there is no Ukraine. This is he thing that he is trying to implement, and as I understand, Zelensky is about to get success in this situation. Now let's move on the ground. Today we got very interesting updates from Crimea, and the Ukrainian forces took a decision, tried to attack Crimean bridge with different types of missiles like Scalp and Storm Shadows, but the Russians managed to repel every single attack. They destroyed every single missile. Some parts of missiles fell down on some industrial area, then there was explosions, but everything is okay with the bridge. As you know, today is a very important holiday in Russian, something like Entity Day, National Entity Day. But the Russians, that was an ambush, because the Russians realized, they understood for sure that during this very important day, like Entity Day, Entity National Day, the Ukrainians would try to make something like this, to destroy bridge or make some terror in Moscow. So they were ready and were prepared. And the Ukrainians, to attack a Crimean bridge used the airfields from Dnieper. So that was like the missile, direction of missile attack. If Ukrainian missile attack, the Russians, of course, knew everything, and as a counter-attack, while the Ukrainian planes was in the air, or while the Ukrainian planes, aircrafts like Su-27, Su-24 tried to make some relocations, regrouping, the Russians made a group missile strike against Dnieper and Dnieper airfield. And we got updates that more than 10 missiles, a few Iskanders, a few just regular missiles, maybe Tornado S, there were no caliber strikes, maybe Giran drones attack Dnieper, and there were a lot of explosions, a lot of detonations, secondary detonations. So probably the Ukrainians lost a few more Su-27 or Su-24 in this area. So that was another failure from the Ukrainian side. Now let's move to Kherson direction. We got a lot of very interesting updates from this territory. Of course, we're going to start with the Krinky, with this small settlement. According to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, as a result of clashes in this area, as a result of very heavy clashes, as I understand, the Ukrainians lost 60 soldiers, 6 armored vehicles, and 1 artillery system Stab. But there is one important note in the Ministry of Defense report, and the thing is that since the beginning, since the creation of this front line, since the creation of this configuration of the front line, when the combat line goes along the Dnieper River, the Russians for the first time noted that during the day, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians managed to repel 1 Ukrainian attack. This is very important, because that means that Ukrainians not just have the foothold on this area. The Ukrainians currently managed to concentrate and to create a critical mass of their forces, and now the Ukrainians can attack. And today the Ukrainians made one first attack somewhere in the Russian bank of the river that the Russians managed to repel. We don't have like the exact direction of Ukrainian attack. I'm adding this arrow softly, but this is very important note. And when talking about other updates, today we discussed the ambush that the Russian forces got into. I would like to discuss with you this operation one more time for better understanding. There was lots of investigations, a lot of speculations about this video, but we need to understand one important note. You see the Russian soldiers were moving along the streets that was already geolocated, and there is one important moment that I would like to you to take a look. And this is the moment. So I will do this very slowly, and take a look, just pay attention if you can see the arrow on this Russian soldier. You see this, my mouse, my cursor, and a little bit later this white point, this one. So if we will improve, if we will make like in a dynamic, you're gonna see that there was a sniper attack. So the Russian soldiers were moving to the forest that located on the south of Krynki, and at some moment the Russian soldiers the Ukrainian soldiers, the Ukrainian snipers started attacking the Russian infantry. And after that, one soldier was wounded, he fell down, and maybe he was wounded in his hands or legs, and the Russian soldiers lay down on the ground trying to to protect themselves from the snipers. And so the thing is that the Russian soldiers were moving from the northern part of Krynki to the southern one, so losing this road, and they were trying to move to the forest to according to the Russian soldiers, Russian positions, but somewhere in this direction the Ukrainians started using the snipers, and they wound one soldier, and after that they managed to pin down the Russians on the ground. And after that the Ukrainians sent the FPV drones, and the FPV drones of Ukrainian forces complete the mission by destroying the Russian squad with FPV bombardments. There are a few important notes in these things. First of all, that the Russians have a lot of problems in Kherson direction. Probably the situation is critical. And the second important thing is that the Russian sniper was attacking someone from the south. That means that as a result of clashes, as a result of Ukrainian offensive operation, the Ukrainians probably managed to establish control over some area in the forest that located on the south of Krynki. And this is a very bad piece of news for the Russians. As we discussed, the main purpose and the main goal of the Ukrainians as a result of this operation is to establish control over the forests that located on the south of Krynki. And if they can do this, first of all, they will be able to hide their equipment, to hide their soldiers, to dig in deeper, to create trenches, fortifications, and to create the strongest foothold in this area. And then the Russians are going to have much more problems to force the Ukrainians to step back. So one more time, the situation develops in a critical way for the Russians. From the other side, for some reason, we continue receiving updates how the Russians are bombing and attacking Berislav, Novoberislav, Shlyakhovo, Kazatska, Dradokamyanka. So I have an opinion, I have a feeling, at least we can describe this situation in two ways. First of all, we see that, hey, the Russians, you have lots of problems in Krynki. Why are you using the most effective weapon against the Ukrainians in Berislav, Novoberislav, in completely different area in comparison with the area that you have the main problems? What is going on? Why are you doing like this? Why are you bombing Berislav while you need to focus your fire on Krynki and the bank and the islands between, let's say, Ukrainian bank of the river and Krynki? What is going on? And of course there might be two answers to this question. First of all, maybe the Russians are completely disorganized in this area and they don't have communications with each other. There is a problem in Krynki, and one forces try to solve this issue, and there is completely different forces, air forces, who continue bombardments of Kazatska, Berislav, trying to destroy the infrastructure, to reduce the concentration of Ukrainian forces and so on. This is first explanation. And this is like the easiest explanation. I'm trying to say that if this option is correct, then there are no problems. So they will find say that if this option is correct, then there are no problems. So they will find create communications between different squads, and starting from tomorrow, the forces that were bombing Kazatsk, Berislav, Visfab will start bombing the Ukrainian forces in Krynki, and the situation will be resolved. But there is another option. And the option is that currently the Ukrainians have concentrated significant forces in this area, and they're sending more and more forces with the purpose to develop the foothold to capture as much as possible territories. And that there is another concentration area of Ukrainian forces in Kazatsk, Berislav, Novoberislav, in this area, and there are much more forces in comparison with that foothold, with the previous one in Krynki, and that the Russians expect more attacks, or at least the beginning of the landing operation in this area. And this is the reason they can't move their air forces from this area, because they understand as soon as they stop bombing this territory, the Ukrainians will launch attack, and there are very high chances that as a result of this attack, the Ukrainians can penetrate the Russian defense belt and to establish a very powerful stronghold in this area, and then the Russians are going to have very bad problems in the very bad days. So we'll see. Anyway, sooner or later, maybe in a week or two, we're gonna understand everything, because the entire situation anyway sooner or later should be or fixed by the Russians, or to get some development from the Ukrainian side. About other updates, the Ukrainians published the video how they were correcting and targeting the Bayraktar drone was correcting, navigating and targeting the Ukrainian HIMARS system, and the Ukrainians were bombing the Russian positions in tundra speed. Probably this is possible, of course, this is possible direction of another Ukrainian attempt to land on the Russian side of Kherson area. They want to take this tundra speed, Kinburn speed. This is the easiest target for the Ukrainians. So we'll see, because something is going to happen. Something is going to happen in this area, and very soon. Currently, the Russians still haven't managed to solve the issues with the Ukrainian forces on their side of the Dnieper River. Now we're moving to Zaporozhye area. We got also very interesting details. There we got a very epic fail case from the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians published the information that there was an area, the small village by the name of Zarichne, and the Ukrainians, the forces of 128th Mountain Assault Brigade, maybe that was like a birthday of this brigade, the date of creation or something, some anniversary, and they collect the officers of higher ranked officers and like higher ranked personnel for some kind of rewards and something like some events and with vodka and so on. And the Russians managed to discover a significant number of mobile phones in one area, and they attacked this area with Iskander, and as a result of that attack, significant number of high officers of that brigade was destroyed in the village by the name of Zarichne. So a very big epic failure from the Ukrainian side. Now we're moving to the classical Zaporozhye area, to the Bradley Square. We got a lot of updates, and as you can see, most of the updates are coming from the Russian side. And you know that the Russians are using very interesting tactics in this area. They have improved their skills significantly, and know that when we talk, if we're talking about the June, July, when there was like an active phase of Ukrainian offensive operation, when they were sending significant number of forces, the Russians had just one thing, just one goal, one purpose: to destroy as much as possible by direct hit, like with Lancet drones, with FPV drone strikes. They were trying just to destroy as much as possible without thinking what is going to be next. But now the Russians have improved their tactics, and now they understand, and either the Russians and the Ukrainians have improved their own tactics, their like military skills and so on. And now it is not enough to attack the Ukrainian soldiers, let's say somewhere in front of Verbovo using FPV drones. It will not bring you the results, because by attacking, let's say, one Ukrainian soldier with one FPV drone somewhere, let's say in front of Verbovo, the thing that you can achieve is to kill this soldier. And it will not change the entire situation. Let's say there are like 10 soldiers, 10 Ukrainian soldiers who are moving along the trenches, and using FPV drone you can kill one soldier. And then not the 10 soldiers will continue their movement, but 9. So they will bypass the dead body and they will continue their movement. So that's why the Russians currently are trying not to kill the Ukrainian soldiers on the edge line, but to wound them. To wound them, because if you can wound a soldier, that means that Ukrainians need to use up to 5 soldiers to evacuate him. Maybe 2 soldiers if there is not a very heavy wound. It may be 3 soldiers if they need to help you to take you away from the combat line, or even 5 if they need to carry you. And now the Russians, and this allow the Russians to, using the drones, of course, to control the Ukrainian movement, the Ukrainian evacuation teams. And now you have possibility with the second FPV drone not to kill just one soldier at the beginning or wound. You can wound the first one, and then using FPV drone to kill the entire evacuation team. And you can get better results, obviously. But some Russian soldiers improved their military experience even more, and they tried to hit not the evacuation team, not the soldiers in the trenches, but also the evacuation machine. Because usually, if a soldier was wounded somewhere in the south of Robotina, evacuation team in 5 or 4 or 3 soldiers need to move the body or wounded soldier a lot further to the north, let's say in this direction, where the Ukrainians can send evacuation machine like light vehicle, and then in this area you can attack can destroy very many and to get very big results. For example, in this video, this is the case. This is the evacuation area, and the Ukrainians tried to evacuate wounded soldiers. Evacuation machine arrived in this interception of road. The Russians were controlling and moving after the evacuation team, and when time comes, they send the coordinates and destroyed this area, and they destroyed evacuation machine, evacuation team, and the wounded soldiers. So this is the experience that the Russians managed to get during the battle for Robotyne. So currently we can say that the most experienced defense forces of Russian currently located in this area between Kopany, Robotyne, Novoprokopovka, Verbovo, Novopokrovka. They can handle with any army in the world. They can repel any attack. They are very experienced and they know what to do, how to suppress and how to break the spirit of any offensive forces. Now we are moving to Urozhaina, to the Vremivka tactical bridgehead. We also got a lot of updates. Most of the mappers have already updated their map, showing that the Russians continue advancing on the west of Staromayorska. Now all these tree lines, all these territories under Russian control. And the thing is that if this information is correct, because we still haven't received any geolocated proofs of that, the Russians have already established fire control over the road that goes between Ravnopol and Staromayorska, which means that Ukrainians lost another supply road in this area. If the Russians continue advancing in this direction, further in direction of this way, in this supply road and closer in direction of Staromayorska, let's add some polygons for better understanding. So if the Russians, I'm trying to say that if the Russians are able to improve their positions like this, then they will be able to cut and to establish some, let's say, fire and visible control also over the northern road that goes to Staromayorska. And all these things reminds me and tells me that maybe the Russians are planning to attack, to counter-attack in Staromayorska and to return control over these two villages like Staromayorsk and Urozhaina. And this operation is very likely because if you remember, during the previous months, the Russians launched attack in Kupiansk, in Bakhmut, in Avdiivka, in South Donetsk direction, and the Ukrainians were forced to send a lot of reserves to these areas. Later we got update that Ukrainians have redeployed all their Marines brigades like 35th, 38th, 36 brigades and the 37th, of course, to Kherson area, and all these brigades used to be in this area. So currently there is a very big gap in manpower and there are a lot of holes in the defense, and the Russians took a decision to use this situation and to start counterattacking. So the situation for the Ukrainians in Velika Novoselovka is critical. They can lose everything they got during the summer offensive operation because they sent almost all of their reserves and forces to other directions to prevent the collapse of this or that front line. When talking about Avdiivka, there are no changes. There are a few important geolocations. As we discussed, the Russians continue bombing and attacking Avdiivka very heavily with all types of weapons they have. On this video, we see another attack of Ka-52 against the Ukrainian forces in Avdiivka. That's just like we are using the video to see the Russian mighty. I think that they can do whatever they like and to destroy whatever they see. The Ukrainians know the critical situation of Avdiivka. We saw a lot of videos from a lot of messages from the Ukrainian side that Avdiivka is going to fall into weeks, that Avdiivka is about to be encircled, and that's why the Ukrainian, let's say, TSIPSO forces, the forces who operates with all these mental operations, media operations, start publishing significant number of videos of Ukrainian forces inside of Avdiivka. Happy Ukrainian soldiers inside the chemical plants, showing that everything is okay with us, we're ready to fight, we're going to fight. Also, we got the video about the Ukrainians from the underground tunnels. The Ukrainians are trying to say that we have... So the Ukrainians, currently this situation, chemical plant, reminds me the situation in Gaza with Hamas forces when they were saying that we're like in the underground tunnels, we expect the Israeli forces and we will do everything we want with them. So currently the Ukrainians are trying to show the same. They're trying to show that everything is okay with us, we have and we will win. So trying to, let's say, to reduce the negative negative atmosphere about the battle of the city, because the Ukrainians are not going to give up and are not going to step back from this fortification. We got very interesting and important geolocation. The Ukrainian FPV drone attacked the Russian tank. And not just tank, but tank with demining equipment. And this video we can see the Russian tank, this is it, with demining like equipment, and the Ukrainian's FPV drone damage and probably destroy the tank. So the thing is that there are a few things that we need to note from this video. First of all, that this area is under complete Russian control according to the geolocation. The second important thing, that the Russians currently are trying to demine these fields, and the main purpose of this demining is to prepare the fields, to prepare the area for further offensive operation of the Russian force. So this is the mining fields with the fields, mine with the fields with mines, and the Russians are planning, obviously, as soon as they complete this process, to continue offensive operation further in direction of these three lines along the railways. And the main purpose of the Russians during the next phase of offensive operation is to establish control over these like fields and over this, let's say, gray zone. If they can do this, as we discussed, they will force the Ukrainian artillery system to move further from this area, and which will also reduce the Ukrainian counter-artillery duels and Ukrainian artillery support of Avdiivka area. And furthermore, I suppose that very soon the Ukrainians will not have any artillery support if the Russians start attack in this direction. So they will be just absent of everything. When talking about Donetsk direction, as a result of clashes, the Ukrainians lost 140 soldiers. And another important updates are coming from Bakhmut direction. The Ukrainians, there are no changes on the ground, but the Ministry of Defense reported that the Russians managed to repel a lot of attacks on Kupinsk direction of 57th and 54th brigades of Ukrainian forces. This is 54th Brigade Mechanized Brigade, and this is 57th Mechanized Brigade, Motorized Brigade. But you need to understand that the classical original place of those brigades, let's say of 54th, was Verkhnikayanskaya and Spornaya. That brigade was responsible for this line. And 57th Brigade was responsible for the area between Orekhovo, Vasilievka, Grigorievka. And the Russians have already launched some offensives in this area, at least in north Bakhmut direction, and they have some progress, some advances. And as you can see, the Ukrainians, due to the problems, due to the significant losses during the summer offensive operation, due to the failure mobilization process, were forced to use their current forces and to redeploy them from one position to another. And currently, this is the second, let's say the northern Bakhmut direction is the second area where the Ukrainians have problems with manpower. There is a real gap. And the second area, critical area, is Verkhnikayanskaya Spornaya, where we used to see 54th Brigade, and this area, as I understand, and I expect another area of Russian activation of offensive operation due to the lack of Ukrainian forces in this area. And I expect that maybe this area is going to fall very soon without like the experienced 54th Brigade. When talking about Kupinsk Liman, this is another day of very heavy losses from the Ukrainian side. 210 soldiers the Ukraine lost on the Kupinsk direction, and 100 losses the Ukrainians lost on Liman direction. Also, the Russians reported that they destroyed every single bridge along Oskol River, and this area doesn't have any support from the mainland anymore, at least the normal support that they used to have in the past. Another interesting update are coming from the western part of Ukraine. Today we got details of Russian attack, Iskander attack against the Ukrainian training center that was located almost on the border with Poland. And this video we see the results of strikes, significant losses, everything was destroyed. This was the polygon, the training center for Western volunteers, mercenaries, for NATO officers, and as you can see, as I understand, nothing managed to survive as a result of that strike. So the situation for the Ukrainians is critical. Zelensky expects military coup, and to reduce the chances of military coup, he took a decision to replace and dismiss Zaluzhny and Syrsky, the most powerful and the most, powerful person in the military forces, and to replace them with other forces, other generals. So we'll see if he is able to do this, because as I told at the beginning, Zelensky doesn't see Ukraine without him. If there is no Zelensky, according to Zelensky, there is going to be no Ukraine. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.